Welcome to this meeting of Cabinet on Thursday, the 12th of December, 2024. We'll take apologies for absence first, please.
I've had no apologies, Leader.
I have one apology to give on behalf of Councillor Louise Gibbard. Unfortunately, her father is unwell, so she's unable to attend this morning. No others then. We'll go to disclosures of personal or prejudicial interest. Are there any for today's meeting? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, item 8, local authority governor appointments panel. I'm a member of the panel. I've got a dispensation to remain but not vote. And also item 22, I am a director of the Wales National Pool appointed by the council, personal interest only.
Okay, and Councillor King.
Yeah, item 13, I'm chair of governors of one of the affected schools, personal interest only.
Thank you very much. Any declarations from any colleagues online? Let me just check.
Yeah, Wales National Pool leader.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Francis Davis. Any others? If not, we'll move then to minutes of the previous meeting. They're on pages 1 to 5 of your agenda today. I've not had any requests for corrections, so I'm happy to move them as a true record. Could I look for a seconder, please? Yeah, thank you, Councillor King, Councillor Lewis. Could I ask if you all show if you're in favour of the minutes, accepting them? Thank you very much. Those are agreed. Announcements of Leader of the Council. I have two announcements this morning. The first one is to pay tribute to the work undertaken by our teams over the weekend. The impacts on Swansea were absolutely astonishing in terms of the number of trees down, the number of incidents that our teams were responding to, but they did an absolutely tremendous job. From our tree teams to our highways teams, to the teams making sure that people were informed of situations, to the people providing warm hubs. We know a number of properties were without electricity for a period of time, and again our teams rallied to make sure that people had warm spaces for them to go to, where they could get refreshments, but also to charge their devices, etc. So again, on behalf of Cabinet, I just wanted to place formally on record our thanks to everyone who rallied round to make sure that people were safe and that we got through the worst of the terrible weather over the weekend. Obviously, over the next few days, there will still be recovery works taking place because there are such as the number of trees and other fallen debris, but our teams continue to work very hard to clear that as quickly as possible. My second announcement is just to reference the fact that we now have the local government settlement. We are currently digesting the detail underneath the headline rate, but it is a significantly improved position over that we were expecting when the previous UK government published its proposals and assumptions for funding for Wales in this current year. So the position has changed positively, both on capital and on revenue. Swansea's headline settlement is 4.7%, and that is above the Wales average. But it also includes some movements from in-year additions that the Welsh Government have provided to local government. Again, the overall quantum for Wales is in the 260-70 million sort of range, against the pressures of 550 million. So again, whilst it is really, really helpful in terms of avoiding the catastrophic situation that local government was facing under the previous UK Tory government proposals, and it is welcome help, it will not fix all of the issues, and that is why Cabinet has been, as cabinets across Wales have been, looking at ways in which we will need to fill any remaining gaps that the funding will leave for us. But grateful for the additional help, and again we will continue to lobby Welsh Government and UK Government for further sums of money between now and final settlement. That concludes my announcements for today, and we'll go to public question time. So, Mr. Evans, do we have any questions from the public today?
No questions, Leader.
Okay, and on then to councillors' question times. Just to say, we obviously have a open and closed part of the agenda, so I'll take any open questions from any questions from councillors for the open part of the agenda now, and then obviously I'll come back to any councillors who have any questions for the closed part of the agenda later. So first of all, are there any questions for the open part of the agenda? Okay, no problem. We will take any questions later on then. So we'll move then to item 7, which is the Scrutiny Inquiry Panel Community Asset Report. So again, welcome Councillor Rice to give the report back on this one.
Thank you, Leader. First off, I'd like to thank all of the panel members, the contributors to the panel inquiry as well, and especially to the staff, to Michelle and Bridge, who helped guide us through this process and helped compile the report. I think the key things I wanted to concentrate on is the general principles behind the report, and then a few of the recommendations to go through. So what we wanted to do is ensure that there were strong and adequate policies in place to cover community asset transfer. And one of the things that we first really spotted was that it wasn't 100% clear of what the overall principles or intentions of the council were at the moment. We wanted to make sure as well that the area is adequately resourced, and we need to have a look at that, I think, as depending on the aspirations of the policy going forward. One of the things we thought was absolutely key was that there was a basic level of genuine consultation with greater engagement with local ward councillors and the communities affected. We suggested that there should be establishment of a single identifiable point of contact for every community asset transfer from the onset of the application. And we also wanted to make sure that the principle wasn't just about making cost savings for the local authority, but actually to, where possible, improve and have a whole community benefit. So what recommendations did we come up with? Well, there were a number, actually. There were 14 of them, but I think each of them makes sense unto themselves. So we'll go through some of those. I think there needs to be, and the panel felt there would need to be a wider debate about what the policy wanted to achieve in the future. And that's something, I suppose, as a cabinet, we would look for you to lead on, to see what you wanted to, what your aspirations were with community asset transfer. We wanted to make sure that there was more of a transparency in deciding upon the applications. And we felt in that case that there should be more than one councillor or cabinet member involved in a decision of an asset transfer. We wanted to make sure that there was support and information available in terms of the whole policy on a website, and there were good toolkits in other local authorities in Wales and over in England, which we thought would be good guidance that people could use. There should probably be more information provided on the onset about running costs and issues like duty of care when people take on assets from the council. And I think that would help people have a stronger plan for how they would use and how they can maintain resource the things going forward that they take on. We thought unless there was an exceptional circumstance, that any transfer should be on a lease of a maximum of 25 years. We did hear some evidence about potential transfers where people were looking at housing opportunities with assets. And we thought that in those exceptional circumstances, and because of funding and other reasons for that, there could be a case-by-case basis to look at those. We thought the reason we would suggest that was because it might be able to lever in more housing opportunities for people, and especially with the challenges we have with social housing or the availability of affordable accommodation for people. We felt it was important that councillors and officers declare personal interests and personal working relationships or personal relationships they have with any groups that may be coming forward. And we also wanted to identify that post-transfer there needed to be some support for the groups and organisations that take on board. We know that it's quite a resource-intensive thing, but we thought that the kind of provision that's given to community centres through the yellow licence arrangements or former yellow licence arrangements would be a good model to look at for community groups that take on assets of the council for their own benefit and for the council and the community going forward. We thought we'd already try and make as much of the opportunities of support through organisations like Swansea Council Volunteers Service and other people who could support people through that and skill them up to be able to do the things that they're trying to aspire to do with the properties. We thought that you could have probably a good peer-to-peer mentoring of people who've been successful of looking after things and how they could help other people in the community. And we could put case studies and ways to link in through the council website. I think going back to the thing that we mentioned earlier, which is at the heart of the panel's sort of discussion, was consultation. And within this report, I didn't want to labour it this morning, but there are details about what we thought might be a basic level of consultation to make sure that people are aware of it, and to avoid maybe some of the community issues that had been with some of the transfers in the past, so that the council can have a smoother transition of land and avoid any challenges from the community or legal issues. Okay, so the next thing we were looking at was providing clear training and guidance for councillors so they can support people in their communities who are interested in asset transfer, and also for community councils, because we felt they had probably quite a strong role to play potentially in in taking on assets, as they have their own precepts and way of levelling their own funding to support things. Again, in 12, you'll see that there's an identifiable single point of contact, which would be useful. We felt sometimes people felt lost, not because we weren't doing the right thing in the council, it's because there were a number of different people they needed to speak to, and there wasn't almost like a central coordinator. They felt things were taking longer than maybe they actually were because of communication. And I think we need to look at a way of developing and investigating and dealing with the negative impacts of council authorised activity on transfer, and to make sure that we know that the council is getting and the community getting what they're hoped for from an asset transfer, especially during the period where it's transferred to somebody else's control. And making sure that there's a process of reviewing the success of has the benefit that was being promised been achieved, basically, and not just in terms of financial, but in the aspirations for community. Okay, I think that sort of concludes everything. I just wanted to again thank the whole panel for their work, because it was quite an in-depth study.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rice, and thank you on behalf of, I thank you and the committee for the work you've done on this. So I'll call a cabinet member in to respond. Who's going to respond on this item? Sorry, Councillor Francis Davis.
Yes, could I thank Councillor Rice and the committee for the work they put into this. I know it was extensive work. They had several meetings, which I attended along with Councillor David Hopkins and others, and many officers, huge input into it. We will go away now and look at it and digest the recommendations that we put in there, and where we feel appropriate, obviously, we will do. Because the community asset transfer is very good, and I think sometimes people think they can just apply for it, get it, long lease, thinking it's going to bring grants. It's far more to it than just that. The ongoing revenue costs of maintaining buildings, we're going to make sure that whoever takes these on are fit for purpose, so that they are going into it with the eyes wide open, and that these community assets are maintained for the community in which they're intended in the long term. So thank you, Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Francis Davis. Thank you, Councillor Rice. So this report is for noting at this point in time, or for accepting? Can I just check? Sorry.
Accepted and it's to accept. Accepted and then report it back into.
Okay, so we all happy to accept the report? All those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Rice. We'll move on then to local authority governor appointments. Councillor Smith.
No, item 7. Yeah, sure.
Oh, sorry. Apologies.
Sorry, I'm
being
wrong.
No, okay. So I thought I was right. That's okay. Local authority governor appointments. Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Can I formally move the report and thank the people that have come forward to act in this capacity as school governor? We know the amount of work that's involved in being a school governor, and of course it's all voluntary, and we thank the people involved. So happy to move the report.
Thank you. Very happy to second. Any comments or questions for Councillor Smith? If not, are you all happy to agree the recommendations in the report? Thank you very much. Those are carried. Move then to item 9, which is the Revenue and Capital Budget Monitoring second quarter report. As is the case, I will call Mr. Smith in first to give his technical run through of the report. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Leader. This is going to be a bit of a roller coaster on this item. There is good, bad and ugly in this report at second quarter. You will be well aware I've expressed a very frank views to director colleagues and to cabinet about the matters that I weigh with great seriousness, but also aware of a number of mitigating factors in terms of demand pressures, a number of mitigating factors in terms of the large resources you have available in year. And although it is ostensibly about the in-year monitoring position, the reason for my concern is the ongoing sustainability of local government, both as referenced by Audit Wales and as you alluded to yourself. Whilst the settlement is better than could have been expected, it doesn't absolve a number of the ongoing structural issues that still abound. So with that opening salvo, I will draw your attention to some bits, and it will start a bit rocky, and then I will try to guide you through on the main bits as to what causes me concern and what you can take some comfort on, and some that I'm afraid you can take less comfort on. But it should all be seen in the context of anything I say is nothing different to what every treasurer in the land is saying, that the pressures on homelessness, on waste, on social care are so enormous that you are all having to work within very, very challenging circumstances. So without further ado, in terms of the detail, in terms of technical advice, recommendation 3 still stands. I have to be advising you, as it's your report leader, that you are reinforcing the need for all directors to minimise service spending and especially service overspending. It is reliant on a huge amount of central pots and also a number of matters from Welsh Government, which I will touch upon because some of these have moved on since the report was cleared and drafted and published. It's been a very busy end of November and first week of December in terms of Welsh Government announcements in terms of current year, and as you rightly just alluded to, the with less than 24 hours ago, the overall settlement that we're all digesting and working through. The important one is section 2.3, the directorate spend position. It is obvious that corporate services and finance are living within their means. The education directorate is an engineered position because you agreed to put £11 million worth of emergency funding into schools in the current year and drew from a number of reserves. And the intention is that education needs to underspend to be able to start topping some of those reserves back up. The problem area of first quarter was place and social services, and they have both deteriorated. I did indicate I expected it to get worse. I didn't expect it to get this worse, if I'm honest, at second quarter, and that has raised my anxiety levels significantly, and it's my duty to advise you accordingly. In absolute terms, both those figures are pretty grim for social services in place. I do understand the nuances and pressures that colleagues and cabinet members face. They are also difficult when compared to the equivalent second quarter last year. They are also difficult because Cabinet, notwithstanding that they recognise the pressures, asked that social services look to live within a £6 million tolerated overspend and place £2 million. None of that is being addressed at this point in time at second quarter. There is a recovery plan for both of them, which is cited by the relevant cabinet members, the chief exec and myself, and there will be some inroads, I'm sure, made in both social services and place. It's called a recovery plan, but a recovery plan should really recover the base position. It is that greatly concerns me the most. Any overspend of that sort of magnitude, given that the settlement, whilst generous, does not ameliorate the known structural pressures, is the thing that's going to cause continued concern. £14 million worth of service overspending is not acceptable to me as your Section 151 officer. I'm sure it is not acceptable to you as Cabinet, notwithstanding you recognise all of the pressures and issues that colleagues face. And I would not want it to be construed as me being overly critical of colleagues or Cabinet. I am merely doing my duty to give technical advice and draw attention to the facts as we see them. But I will lighten the mood a little bit as I go through the report on the other items. I draw your attention to section 2.8. The reason it's in bold, no one is authorised to overspend more than Cabinet and Council have approved in accordance with the Council Financial Procedure Rules. You have already at first quarter accepted £8 million worth of tolerance, given that there are exceptional circumstances in place and social services already, and I have great sympathy with Cabinet members and colleagues on that one. Section 3 sets out the contingency fund position, and it has not changed in overall terms from first quarter. The whole of the contingency was spent at first quarter. There have been some ups, there have been some downs, but it is all spent at the end of the second quarter. I have facilitated some additional asks from members around action over Christmas and warm spaces and holiday hunger, and corporate management team agreed some additional need to provide support to social services in the short term, awaiting any announcements of Welsh Government in-year grant funding. So the message is quite clearly at second quarter, whole of contingency fully spent, as was the case in the first quarter. And that included a cap at 2 million and 6 million on place and social services. Because it's all spent, you have no more money to allocate or tolerate from contingency on those overspends. I go on a bit further, just below that table, just above the paragraph marked 3.3 in bold. The one-off nature of all of these funding sources cannot be understated. The concern I have is around the base follow-through into following year if those measures are not addressed significantly by third quarter. Section 4 sets out the inflation provision, and in line with the first quarter, you had about £5 million unallocated. That was held because we were waiting for a raft of arrangements in terms of the final local government pay scheme, the final settlement of the teachers' pay scheme, what may be reimbursed from Welsh Government, etc., etc. The good news is that £5 million is still fully available. The bad news will come in a moment when I'm advising that it all has to be deployed to balance out the overspend pressures. But it's still a good position to be in terms of having that central inflation provision available to deploy in year. The issue is going to be what you have available next year, given the messages and comments we've already made, Leader. Section 6 sets out the overall revenue summary, and this is where we start to take some degrees of glimmer of hope in the current year. Because of the size of contingency, which was massively boosted by a 12 million carry forward from the previous year, which on this current year's figures will not be repeated, you are in a position where that £14 million service overspend can be significantly mitigated by the previously agreed underwrites, 6 million cap and 2 million cap for social care and homelessness, and you are now required to draw all of the remaining central inflation provision and still end up a net £1 million overspent on overall services. It's not much in the scheme of things, and there may be some pessimism bias in it, and there may be some things that turn up. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment on the specific grants announcements from Welsh Government. But it means I have to advise that you are technically overspent on services clearly, even with every central lever at my disposal deployed at the point at which time this report was written. Just below the table in 6.1b, I remind you that we forecast at least a £7 million, yet again one-off, several years of one-offs, but one-off windfall on our treasury management activity because our deferrals are borrow at low 1% rates and then defer future borrowing is paying absolute dividends. It gives you an enormous cushion, but that cushion is needed to top up the capital equalisation reserve to enable you to make large capital investment decisions. You've got 2 on the agenda in exempt item, which will require use of the capital equalisation reserve. You had 2 at the last cabinet, which required that one. So whilst the capital equalisation reserve is a revenue reserve and can be used to support core funding, it should not be, because it will diminish your ability to spend on your aspirations on the capital programme. So I added a slightly more controversial rider this time compared to the last report. There is a section 6 right at the end in F, bold, saying on the basis at the point at which this report was written, you were pretty much out of options in current year and you required reliance on more money coming from Welsh Government, officers and members working together to make sure they reined in the degree of overspend, and we'll see what happens for the rest of the year. The one bit of good news I would add is that there was, as I said, a flurry of activity. So we have had a teacher's pensions grant, we've had a teacher's pay grant. They're a little on the disappointing side compared to what I'd hoped to get, but they are broad, decent levels of compensation for administered price rise costs put upon us by decisions by the previous UK government and the Welsh Government in terms of teachers' pay. They're not worth anything. They will merely wash through and ameliorate existing pressures already factored into schools. There was, however, an indication that there's just under £4 million of general support available from Welsh Government, literally come in the last couple of days, and that will be incredibly helpful and will reposition part of the overall messaging for third quarter. If Cabinet members and officers are able to rein in spend on the overspending directorates, taking into account that £4 million worth of general support in the current year, which it is looking like is also baselined into next year, which is going to be incredibly useful for solving some of my concerns about parts of the structural deficit. It's not going to be enough to solve it, but that's important because it means the overall position moves from being 1 million over to a couple of million under and enables you to conserve the capital equalisation reserve position. Capital remains significantly slipped, not materially different to previous years, and you know my views on that. That enables me to continue to draw on cash and defer the formalised external borrowing of all of the capital aspirations and plans you've already agreed. In normal fashion, I only lightly touch upon the HRA because this is ostensibly about the general funds position, but the HRA, as was noted at first quarter, has its own problems, myriad in nature, and I may defer to the Cabinet member who may wish to say a bit more on the housing revenue account as a whole. Putting it all together, Appendix A in its normal tried and trusty format makes quite clear. Services were £14 million overspent. I had £13 million available at my disposal to advise you to allocate, to enable you to mitigate that down to the 1 million. You have a £7 million windfall one-off on interest, which enables you to get to that overall position of not drawing £6 million from reserves that you had otherwise planned to do. I would hope, as a result of the wash through of actions by directors, cabinet members, the extra Welsh Government money, that will get back to a position that I have at least all of the underspend on capital financing available to assist your other aspirations. Whilst the draw from reserves is lower than budgeted, it is incumbent upon me to remind you that you set the budget knowingly as a council and understandably with a planned draw from earmarked reserves of 25 million, and it is this unsustainability aspect which concerns Audit Wales, concerns all authorities. You have rightly chosen to make planned draws from reserves to protect services, to see what comes in the current settlement, which is a 1-year deal, and wait for the comprehensive spending review to come. And I fully understand that, and the assumptions and decisions you have made politically are perfectly acceptable to me as your statutory officer in terms of certifying the reasonableness of the position. But it does mean that the position is tight. It is incredibly tight in the current year. I have to put on record my concerns. I have to acknowledge, though, that there are mitigations in the current year which help enormously, and literally the news in the last week from Welsh Government has doubly helped the position and lightened my mood somewhat. But the concern remains those structural issues going into next year, which, notwithstanding the settlement may be more generous than we have been led to believe by previous government, and that there are some generosities to come in the detail through the transfers in the settlement, it does not ameliorate those pressures. It goes back to the point you made quite right at the beginning, Leader. 200 and something million for local government in Wales versus pressures of 600 million does not mean we are out of the woods. We're not out of the woods in current year any more than we are in future years. And given that we may be much tighter on central inflation, much tighter on contingency, it's what in-year wiggle room you've got to make sure that a budget that is set is not only lawful on paper, but credible in practice and does not result in immediate in-year overspends. That may sound quite dire and grim from me, but it is a message that I'm sure every treasurer in the land is saying. It is the sustainability issue, whilst acknowledging that councillors, councils, senior officer colleagues have got dreadfully difficult decisions to make in terms of managing and mitigating in-year actions whilst trying to maintain services at a level that you consider politically acceptable to yourselves and the public. So I think I'll stop there in terms of technical advice. I think I've made clear that I'm more relaxed in current year because of the mitigations, but I remain gravely concerned, and on the record gravely concerned, about the sustainability. But I would not want any viewer or any reporter or anyone else reading or the public to be concerned that I'm saying anything different to any other treasurer in the land. It is incredibly difficult at the moment. There is a degree of resetting going on, flowing through UK and Welsh Government. But as you rightly said, Leader, we are far from out of the woods. I will pause there and hand back to yourself, recognising that it is a report in your name, but it is incumbent upon me to give statutory officer advice to Cabinet on the record.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I am grateful for your advice, as I'm sure Cabinet is, and for your candour as always. Again, in terms of the report, as you say, it was a snapshot in time which is now out of date, and the situation has improved to some degree since then. Historically, the first and second quarters of any year are the most challenging quarters, and we always see improvements in third and fourth quarters, but that will be dependent in terms of the degree of improvement on how successful those recovery plans are. And you are absolutely right to draw to the attention of people looking at this report of the structural nature of the concerns that we're dealing with. I'm going to turn that into political language, because what that actually means is last year's settlement to Wales was absolutely disastrous in terms of what the UK government provided, and the future plans for funding to Wales, had the UK government's plans been held to, it would have been much, much worse this year than we have received. That is the reality of why so many councils are facing the difficulty that they're facing. Swansea's position, as you will have seen in the Audit Wales report published recently, is one of the strongest in Wales, if not the strongest. It's up there in the top 2 or 3 in terms of both our available cash versus assets against our pressures, and also our level of reserves. So in terms of weathering the storm, as I'm sure Mr. Smith would agree, we are well placed to do that. But the point Mr. Smith makes corporately is one that we will continue to make politically, which is that there needs to be a significant sustained investment in local government funding from national governments, both in the UK and in Wales. And that is the only thing that can really address the structural issues long term. The pressures to social care, the people reaching our front door in social care have risen by more than 20%. That is a similar position that is happening across Wales. There needs to be full recognition of those pressures within the funding that is received by local government. Likewise, our homeless pressures have rocketed, as they have across Wales and across the UK. And that is because we have a housing crisis, which has been created over the last 40 years and made worse in the last 14. We are dealing with people who come to Swansea because of the way in which we provide as best help we can to get them housed within 24 hours, and then seek to house people after that. We have a large house building programme that we're continuing to push forward on, as well as a huge maintenance programme to improve the properties we own. But you cannot build homes as fast as the demand is increasing, and that is why we have waiting lists and pressures. So, as Mr. Smith said, very understandable in terms of the pressures that have emerged both in social services and in homelessness. And go to any council across Wales, you will see exactly the same discussion and same position being laid out. I take comfort from what Mr. Smith has said both here today in terms of the effect of some of the in-year announcements that we've seen in the last few days, and when we unpick the settlement, the money that we hopefully will be able to draw on to deal with some parts of those pressures. But we are of one on this, which is that cabinet members, directors, all of us need to ensure that those recovery plans are successful and that the position improves, as it usually does in third and fourth quarter. Again, very, very difficult set of circumstance for everybody to deal with, because you cannot ignore the social services pressures. They are real, they are justified, but there isn't enough money in the system, and as Mr. Smith would say, there isn't enough batter in the mix to get you a good cake at the moment, and that's what we need. We need more central funding coming in to deal with social services pressures. If you've read the WLGA paper on this, it makes the pressures clear for Wales, and that's where we get to that 600 million or 500 and odd million pound pressures position that we have laid out. So again, I would expect when we get to third quarter an improved position. That is what Mr. Smith is also expecting. There will obviously be a reset to some of the numbers that are in this report. Now we have the settlement. All of those are positive factors that we should expect, but it's in our gift now really to make sure that we reduce that overspend down as much as we can, because again, this authority, as Mr. Smith would also recognise, has been in surplus over the last few years in terms of its outturn position. We don't want to be in a position where we just come in balanced position, having to use reserves. Again, in previous years, we've been in surplus, and we'd hope to achieve a position where we've more than balanced the budget at the end of the year. That should still be our aim, because that gives us further headroom to invest in services, which is what we did, as you know, at first opportunity this year. We invested over £13 million into services, as we were able to do so from the outturn position. So again, consistent position with Mr. Smith, but I take a more optimistic view given where we are in the cycle and given the recent changes over what's written in the report, because the report was a snapshot in time and is now out of date. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader. Happy to second the report. And yes, absolutely, we need to acknowledge the national homelessness and housing crisis that we see ourselves in. I wanted to take the opportunity to pay tribute to our teams. There's an impressive amount of homelessness prevention that happens with our teams. They're working flat out to support residents, whether they're in private accommodation or the social sector, and of course our council tenants. It's pleasing to note that we continue to invest in terms of capital in the HRA. This year we've committed over £53.5 million towards new homes and the maintenance and ongoing maintenance and repairs and improvements of our existing council homes. We're at 38% in terms of expenditure there, so that's good to note. However, I must flag that even though we've given an additional £2 million to our revenue costs for repairs, we're in an improved position. We're now seeing around 4 million overspend at Q2 on repairs. There are many reasons for that. There's been a significant increase in demand, and we're also seeing an increase in the cost of building materials, which we hope will settle down at some point. So we will continue to monitor that closely. And there is a comprehensive review of that going on at the moment to try and bring those sums down even further. However, I don't feel the need to apologise for investing in our council homes in terms of dealing with maintenance and repairs and ongoing issue for our council tenants. And we will continue to be the best landlord that we can possibly be to improve people's homes, particularly through the winter period and the pressures that we see families having to address. So I won't say anything more than that, other than pleasing to see significant investment, as always, going into our council homes for the benefit of our tenants.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lewis. Any other Cabinet members got any questions or comments on the report? If not, I've moved. I believe Councillor Lewis seconded. So can I ask you if you can all show if you're in agreement with the recommendations in the report? Thank you very much. We'll move then to item 10, which is Q2 monitoring report. I go to Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. The report provides an update on Q2 performance. The chart in 2.3 of the report shows a vast majority of our corporate plan and success measures and performance indicators are on track. Paragraph 2.4 outlines some positive progress across the council's wellbeing objectives. We've also seen positive feedback from schools, highlighting some good quality support offered by the council and progress on tackling poverty strategy. On paragraph 2.5 of the report, a number of the performance indicators continue to remain green across Q1 and Q2. The number of children and young people supported by the Child and Family Services, processing of council tax reduction and housing benefit claims, and the number of data breaches resulting in ICO intervention, and also beyond bricks and mortar, the contract started. Plan applications still remain one of the best performers in Wales. However, in Q2 and Q1, we are still having some challenges, including financial pressures, high demand across social care, pupil attendance in some areas, high levels of homelessness, and achieving net zero. So I've got nothing to add to the report, only to move the report to Cabinet this morning. I put my record on thanks to Lee Wenham for producing this report.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Very, very happy to second the report. And we just heard of the financial challenges at second quarter. Again, performance at second quarter continues to be very good, with some key improvements in there. As always with these reports, there are some elements for us to focus on in terms of improvement, but largely, as you could see there in the graph on chart 1, over 73% of the performance measures are on track, which is a really good position, with a further 18 very, very close. So happy for any Cabinet members who wish to draw anything out from the report to come in at this point. Councillor Pugh? Sorry, Councillor Anthony. Apologies.
Right, I still call myself Pugh as well, you know. Yeah, no, just to echo really what Councillor Hopkins was saying, and I think that, you know, it's been very hard times. It's hard times for everybody. It's hard times in the community. It's hard times for staff. You know, we're performing at excellent levels with lots of things that's often out of our control. You know, even if you take the weekend with the floods and the storms and the, you know, and all great plans that are in place sometimes have to be thrown up in the air and emergencies dealt with, sort of thing, you know, and from a huge sort of poverty and employability sort of thing, you know, the challenges are out there. And I can honestly say the staff in this council go above and beyond. They will do everything that they can. And that's not just within the poverty team. You know, our Rebs and Bens are a fantastic team, and people are getting so much support, because if you're in debt, the last thing you want to do is actually talk to somebody about it. But our officers to go that extra mile to try and help people, you know, and we can really feel that. And yourself and I've been involved in, you know, over £600,000 now of grants going out, and they were turned around in a very short time. Staff working flat out to make sure the families didn't go without for Christmas and that. So I just wanted to put my thanks on record, really, to everyone. And myself and Martin were at an employability event a week or so ago, and it was just absolutely heartbreaking, heartwarming, all those sort of emotions, you know, of people that couldn't, they just couldn't cope with school. They just couldn't cope with the environment. You know, they were picked up by many services within the council, and bit by bit, eventually, we've helped people, and in the third sector, not just the council, and some of our own staff were there talking about the very difficult paths they've had. And one little boy who absolutely hated school is our caretaker in one of our schools. Do you know what I mean? So our staff, in partnership with everybody, I'd just like to put on record, go above and beyond. Do you know what I mean? Because when you see these successes, it's fantastic, you know.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Anthony. I think that's a fair point there in terms of often when you look through the report, those measures can look a little dry. But when you get below that, you see the actual work being carried out and the impact of those works on people's lives. And, you know, absolutely, I fully agree with you. I know, again, commend the work that you and Councillor Gwilliam have done, along with all of the officers, to get that package of support out there this Christmas. Those people receiving vouchers or food help in the run up to Christmas, that will be invaluable to them. And again, you know, as I said in my previous comments, you know, had we have not endured 14 years of the destruction of the welfare state and people's lives, those sort of actions wouldn't be necessary. And I hope we get to a point where they're not. But in the meantime, we're going to do all we can locally to help people. Councillor Smith?
Yes, thank you, Leader. And I'd echo what Councillor Anthony has said there, because looking at the Education Directorate figures, yes, there are some concerns here about issues around school improvement, about school attendance and issues there. What I would say, and again echo what Councillor Anthony said, this is not, each of these statistics is an individual child, and you can't divorce what's happening in the school from what's happening in wider communities, which is why, yes, the Directorate has strategies to address some of these issues that have been highlighted, but it's about a whole council approach, about all staff across the council working together to meet the needs of our families and communities that will enable the children and young people to access and benefit from the learning offer that we have. You can't deal with one in isolation from the other, and I think that's becoming very clear from these statistics and from the corporate priorities that we have as a council overall.
Thank you, Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I think just building on what Councillor Smith said, and you'll see the report, there's two areas I wanted to reference. So the report mentions the Creative Swansea Network, which is something that has been funded by the Shared Prosperity Fund, but actually what that network has been doing is building a partnership and a place for creative industries in Swansea to come together, share their ideas and share their stories. And actually it's highlighting that there is a flourishing creative network within Swansea across many different areas. So things like gaming, you know, coding for making games and design and all that kind of thing. And I think it's linking into what Councillor has said about building as opportunities for young people, so that, you know, when someone comes and says, well, I want a career in designing games, they say, brilliant, there's somewhere in Swansea where you could do that. And the other aspect, I think, for the communities is the Human Rights City work, which has really ploughed forward, and the access by communities to the pocket guide that was produced has been incredible. We continue to get requests for that. I think that work has really been recognised. Just last week we were doing a video for Welsh Government, who were recognising the work we're doing there. We had a session with UNESCO as well. So I think, you know, really pushing those really strong ideas forward to support our communities, and I think it's doing really well working across the whole council to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Again, fully agree with the comments from yourself and from Councillor Smith. Are there any other Cabinet members who wish to comment on this report? If not, it's been moved and seconded. So could I ask you all if you agree with the recommendations on page 60 of your agenda? Please show. Thank you very much. Those are agreed. We'll move then to item 11, which is the local economic delivery plan. Councillor Francis Davis.
Thank you, Leader. As you will recall, everybody, in January 2022, we adopted the South West Wales Regional Economic Delivery Plan. A lot of work has carried on since then, and we've worked on a complementary local economic delivery plan, which has now been produced and what's before you to accept. There's been a lot of consultation with groups, people like the Swansea University, Trinity St David's, Gower College, Swansea Coastal Housing, Pobble, to name just a few, the University Health Board, Swansea Business Improvement District, Urban Foundry for the region. It's all in the report here. And what we got out of that was the plan, and I put it forward to you today for acceptance so that we can continue to grow. You see in figure 1, the local economic delivery plan strategic framework, all built around this to make sure that we go forward on a sound basis. So I'm happy to move the recommendation, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Francis Davis, and can I thank you and the officers for the work on this one. As you say, a really useful report and plan. And again, we are identified as being a city that's projected to be the 7th fastest growing in the UK this coming year. And it's important that we have the right plans to support sustained growth at that level. So thank you very much, Councillor Francis Davis, for that. Councillor Lewis.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Thank you to Councillor Robert Francis Davis for bringing forward this really comprehensive plan. Just wanted to highlight strategic aims 1 and 2, decarbonising the business base and decarbonising the wider economy. And I look forward to working closely with the Cabinet member on those portfolio items that cross departments. It's great to see this in the plan, and I really welcome it.
Thank you very much. Are there any other Cabinet members who wish to comment? If not, again, the report's been moved and seconded. You've got the recommendation there on page 120. Can I all ask you if you're in agreement, please? Thank you very much. That is carried. Okay, we'll move on then to item 12, which is the new collaboration agreement for the regional educational workforce, which is partneriaeth. Councillor Robert Smith.
Thank you, Leader. And first of all, can I thank the officers for preparing this report, in particular Helen Morgan-Rees, in whose name it appears. This report outlines a new model by which we will support curriculum and professional learning across Swansea. It is designed to meet current needs, and we know that there was a review of education partners undertaken by Welsh Government in 2024. Members will be aware of various iterations and various collaborative structures that have existed over the last 10, 15 years. But what I think this provides is a closer alignment of the funding with the duty on us as a local authority, and that reflects the changes that were brought in to the funding arrangements on the 1st of April 2024. What is outlined in the report are the governance models, which I think are appropriate to the new model, the staffing arrangements, again, that are appropriate to the new model, and the benefits that this will bring in terms of curriculum and professional learning across the partnership area, and also the way, as is outlined on page 174, that these arrangements will enable local priorities to be addressed. I think this gives us flexibility to respond to current and future needs, and it's very happy to move the report, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Very happy to second the report. And again, thank you and everyone for the work done on this. I think the new proposals are a real improvement and will help us to deliver our educational aims and give our children the best support we can to be the best that they can be. So thank you very much for that. Are there any comments or questions, Councillor Smith? If not, again, could I ask you to state whether you're in agreement with the recommendations as laid out on page 152 of the report, I believe it is. Thank you very much. Those are carried. We'll move then now to the item 13, proposed new model for special teaching facilities across Swansea. Again, Councillor Smith.
Again, me leader, can I thank the officers again for preparing this report, and in particular on this occasion, Michelle Thomas and the work that's gone on in leading up to this report. And I think it's clear from what's been presented in front of us that there's been a lot of background work and a lot of events, a number of events and consultations have taken place leading up to this report. What is proposed is that we adopt a new model for specialist teaching facilities across Swansea. There are around 600 pupils with more complex and severe needs, learning needs, whose needs will be addressed by the STFs. The proposals are to redesignate 25, to change the specialism of 3, to open 5, expand 4 and close 3. These are all plans that will affect future provision, and no child currently in the system will be affected by these changes. So any child who's currently in the system will receive the same provision as now. This is provision that will change for children entering the system. I'd like to thank those who responded to the consultation and assure them that their views have been taken on board and will be taken on board as we implement this policy. What we are designing here is a local offer so that provision would be made closer to where the children live, closer to the communities where they live, reduce travel time and improve the accessibility of the provision, specialist provision, by doing so. We're also changing the policy of diagnosis, so there is no need for diagnosis before a child will be able to access an STF provision, and this will be replaced by a needs analysis. So it will enable us to respond more quickly, I believe, to the needs of individual children. What the report proposes is that we now move to statutory notice and then proceed to determine our course of action on the Cabinet meeting on the 25th of March. And I happily move the report, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and again, happy to second, and thank you and the officers for the extensive work that's been done on this. As you say, no current learner will be affected by the changes, but new learners will hopefully see, as they progress through the system, facilities which meet their needs in the places where they can most easily access them. And I think that's part of the change that we're making here, is to make sure that we modernise the estate so that the facilities are in the right places and able to deal with the emerging needs that children and pupils will have. Again, I think the change to not require diagnosis prior to accessing hub is absolutely right and substantial change, and again will benefit many families and children who will require those services. So again, it's not change for no reason. It's change to try and improve the service, to improve the locations where people can access those services and allow people easier access to those services. So again, absolutely the right thing to do. I'll go next to Councillor Anthony, please.
Yes, I'd like to support the report and everything. There's a huge amount of work gone in here, and you know, and members of staff have been really abused as well, verbally, dreadfully, in one of the schools in the car park. Do you know what I mean? I know emotions run high and everything, but you know, there was a really nasty incident. and nobody should have to put up with that. Do you know what I mean? But from having a comp in my ward that I know that children travel from all over Swansea to it, and having had a child who travelled the other way in Swansea, with transport, they hate it. They don't like being so far away and in the travelling for a long time. Many children are coming from, except from all over Swansea. That can't, as excellent as it is, and nobody disputes the units are not excellent. We have to look at doing something different, and we have to try and be more local and more, and wrap around children. So I just think, yes, it's change, and change never comes easy, but none of the children that are in the schools now will be affected, and everybody can work towards it. And I think it's a positive way forward. And just by having to take that diagnosis off has got to be absolutely enormous. Do you know what I mean? So I think overall, I think it's excellent, and I think it is the right way to go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Anthony. Councillor Smith.
Yes, if I can come back on that, because I think it's important to say that these changes are not driven by any concerns about the quality of provision in our STFs. It's about it's a reflection of the quality and the success of our STFs in meeting the needs of these children and young people. And the desire is to enable this to take place across Swansea, rather than in certain areas, notwithstanding the strengths and the quality of the provision that's been developed so far. So it's not a reflection on the existing provision. It's about spreading it a lot wider across Swansea and enabling us to make that local offer. And I think that's going to be essential, Leader.
Yes, absolutely right, Councillor Smith. It's about the need being closer to the child, and so the provision being closer to the child, and that's something I think everyone would support. Okay, are there any other comments or questions on this one? Other than that, the item has been moved and seconded. Could I ask you to show whether you're in support of the recommendations, please? Thank you very much. Those are carried. We'll move then to item 14, which is an update on Swansea Council's progress towards achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2030. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader. And I'm very proud to move the recommendation that Cabinet endorse the progress made during 23-24 and pay tribute to what is a very small team within the Council delivering on a mammoth ambition. Swansea Council, like other 22 local authorities across Wales, has been reporting its emissions to Welsh Government since 2019. So regionally, we've aligned ourselves to focus specifically on scopes 1 and 2 emissions for buildings, energy and fleet, essentially because these are services that are within the Council's control. There's no specific budget in the MTFP for this, but we do predominantly source grant funding wherever we possibly can. Net Zero 2030 is one of the key strands within our new corporate wellbeing objective, delivering on nature recovery and climate change. So those 3 strands are Swansea Council achieving net zero by 2030, Swansea as the wider city and county achieving net zero by 2050, and nature recovery. And whilst Swansea Council is continuing efforts to reduce emissions, work does remain challenging. This is largely due to resources, technical advancement, skills, supply chain, and conflicting pressures and funding. So it's really pleasing to see that climate change features in the UK national budget, and we look forward to disseminating what that means in terms for us as a local authority. Swansea achieving net zero by 2050 and delivering on nature recovery are progressing well. Swansea Project Net Zero was launched at last year's Green Conference, and the Climate Signatories Group are leading through the Public Service Board on an adaptation and mitigation plan for Swansea. I won't go into any great detail in item 2. Emissions reporting is detailed there, but just to flag regarding natural gas. So Swansea Council currently purchase 100% natural gas through the Crown Commercial Services procurement process. However, we're not able to use this to offset our carbon emissions footprint from purchasing green gas unless Welsh Government change their current position on this issue. And we continue to lobby on that because we do feel that we deserve recognition for purchasing 100% green fuels, which is not counted, unfortunately, at the moment. At item 3, you will see Swansea Council's carbon footprint. I know members have had the report. I won't go through that in any great detail. And then item 4 sets out Swansea Council's Net Zero 2030 delivery plan update, which spans 2023 to 2030. The external challenges are set out in item 5. So we must continue to work regionally to help develop skills, knowledge and capacity. And it's pleasing to see that all councils within the region have got a local area energy plan, and we're working on a regional area energy plan to align wherever there's crossover and commonality. And obviously there will be quite a considerable amount of that. So we look forward to working with partners. We must continue to lobby government to ensure sufficient funds are made available. This is set out in this report, and obviously we've had announcements with the budget since the writing of this report. So as I said, we'll look into that in greater detail. And supply chains need to be more local, which is set out in our local procurement plan, which I'm pleased that we've and tribute to Councillor David Hopkins for that procurement strategy, which focuses on local supply chains, local businesses wherever possible, which clearly reduces our carbon footprint as well. And then we continue to work with stakeholders and try to mitigate such challenges. And as I said in the previous report, great to see this referenced in the local economic delivery plan. The internal challenges are set out in item 6. The project must continue to be recognised as a behaviour change initiative, and small wins have been achieved, and it's effectively everyone's business. And so we're communicating that message across the council to our teams on the ground. And in October 2023, the team launched a premise manager energy saving toolkit during a pilot at Gosainen Library and Housing Services. A 40% reduction using this tool was achieved over a 2-month period. So we will continue to promote that to other parts of the local authority in order for them to make those savings as well. We've got a fully costed plan referenced in item 7, but I should flag that the cost of greening our fleet is estimated in the region of £50 million, with an additional administration and infrastructure cost of around 700,000. So not an insignificant sum of money, and will be a continuing challenge. We are looking at our fleet and looking whether we can also reduce our fleet. Because obviously there's an element of green in the fleet, but if you have less of a fleet, then that reduces your footprint as well. And in terms of buildings and energy, some great progress in terms of the LED street lighting, with just around 500,000 being the remaining investment to green all of the lighting columns. And to touch upon grey fleet, we've noticed post-COVID that there are more journeys being carried out and more business mile claims. So we're looking at examining that and doing some data analysis to see if we can reduce that as well. And in terms of buildings, there's an estimated retrofit cost of around 178 million. So again, we will need further funding from governments to be able to achieve this. And finally, just to sum up, to draw attention to Appendix 1, which is Swansea Council Net Zero 2030, 30 actions by 2030, a summary at the stance at November 2024, and you will see the red highlighted in that action plan is specifically related to our fleet challenges. Happy to take any questions, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis, and thank you and all the Cabinet members, directors, heads of service who are taking actions on this plan, because as you say, it's everybody's business. I think the key point that you make in all of that, though, is that we are making good progress on the things that we can make good progress on, and that we are funded to make progress on. But there are a number of challenges it's similar to the situation on social services and others. If government wants the sorts of change that we all want to see between now and 2030 and by 2050 for the city, then there's going to have to be sustained investment and support to enable us to move to much greener technologies to decarbonise our entire estate. We welcome the grant that has been announced as part of the settlement. Yes, I think 30 million for Wales to help councils again go forward. But I think the last time we reviewed this, I think Swansea's challenge over the next few years would be some 700 million. So it's helpful, but it doesn't get us to where everybody would like us to be in terms of that aims on net zero. So again, we will continue to do everything we can locally to make progress, but we do need to see governments match their ambitions with cash. Okay, are there any further questions, comments for Councillor Lewis? No, if not, you've got the recommendations there, I believe, on pages 502. Sorry, 482. Can I ask everybody if they're in favour, please? Thank you very much. That is agreed. We'll move then to our next report, which is Houses of Multiple Occupation Licensing Policy. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. The two recommendations set out on page 503. Well, I would like to put on record my thanks to Alice Marks, who's produced this report. What this report seeks to do is ask us about the consultation on an amended policy. The policy was really concentrated on trying to get improvements, particularly in waste and recycling and also antisocial behaviour. But I will give a commitment at this point for the 4 main wards that are affected by this. I will set up a briefing with officers to go through the report, and then obviously once that consultation has taken place, we intend then to bring it back to council for adoption in early 2025. The report is quite a comprehensive report. As you can see, and I must put on record, this is not just about student accommodation. There are lots of people who live in HMOs, so it is not just student accommodation. So I got nothing to add to the report, only to just to move the report and hope we can take it further in the way of public consultation. Happy to move.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hopkins, and thank you again for the work done on this by yourself and the officers. As you say, it's to begin the public consultation to deal with an update to the policy. Again, just to remind members, we've taken a number of steps over the last 10 years. Firstly, to amend the areas where HMOs can be established, tighten the rules to protect communities from intensification of HMOs. And then we've also taken steps to ensure that landlords adhere to the appropriate policies and treat their tenants appropriately when they are operating HMOs. And again, this will see hopefully further improvements and direction of travel in for that policy. So again, very happy to second this one. Any comments or questions for Councillor Hopkins? If not, again, recommendations are there on page 503. Can I ask you all if you're in favour, please? Thank you very much. That is agreed. Next item is one for myself, which is the city centre ownership and asset retention strategy. The recommendations are pretty straightforward there on page 532. We have had engagement with developers and others who have been assisting us to look at how we can encourage appropriate development and regeneration in our city centre long term. One of the challenges that has been raised has been that the council has had quite a firm position in terms of disposals of assets within the core city centre. This report does not change that dramatically, but what it does do is to bring a revised policy forward where we have a graduated approach to looking at how we can assist people to unlock developments and to make them viable. And that would include, in certain circumstances, the potential for us to dispose of assets to assist development. But again, it is a graduated scale, and again, it is incumbent upon developers to prove that there is a need for that. But again, it's a range of issues that the council can take to help developers take on buildings, often which are challenging ones to do, and people will have seen a number of key developments opening over recent months. We want to see that continue. We want to see more and more investment coming into Swansea, and we want to see more and more development being done by the private sector without the council having to do the heavy lifting on those developments. And again, making sure we have an appropriate policy to support that when it's needed is what's before you today. Would draw your attention to recommendation 3, which does maintain the existing disposal of less than 1 million would be still under delegated powers. But again, recommend this to Cabinet. I think it's an improved policy, protects our holdings in the city centre, but does give us some flexibility to dispose if that is evidenced sufficiently. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader. I really welcome this. It's a hugely positive step forward. Very happy to second the report.
Thank you very much. Any other Cabinet members wish to comment on this report? If not, recommendations are there on page 532. Could I ask you all to show if you're in agreement, please? Thank you very much. That is agreed. And then on to item 17, which is Financial Procedure Rule 7, update on the grant for 20 miles per hour. Councillor Stevens.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the report outlines our bid to Welsh Government for additional funding to support the review and further works required on the 30-mile-an-hour exemptions. So this funding will enable us to address some public concerns, complete essential signage and lining works, as well as review over 700 public submissions to ensure the speed limits align with Welsh Government guidelines as well as local needs. Excuse me. So as I said back in March last year, we've been constrained by Welsh Government guidance on where changes can be made. However, we have committed to a thorough and transparent review process. And as you know, Chair, Swansea has been held up as a model for implementation across Wales, having already amended the speed limit to some 140 roads from the default 20 to 30 mile an hour, primarily focusing on trunk roads and main routes within the provided guidance to ensure we keep our network running, but still allowing for a safe, sensible limit in built-up areas around schools, community centres and things like that. So our road safety team, Chair, are currently in the process of reviewing the public comments, and any proposed changes will follow a formal consultation process through traffic regulation orders early in the new year. And it's important to note that this review will have to be done with Welsh Government guidelines in mind. This may allow for some potential amendments and will inform our next bid for funding. So our officers are seeking to balance safety, public concerns and compliance with national policy to ensure that we remain at the forefront. So I just want to put on record my thanks, Chair, to Alan Ferris and our entire road safety team for the huge amount they've worked on from the announcement of the legislation through to the review, and what we are doing to keep within that legislation and balance road safety areas in the areas that need it and keep the city moving via exemption. So without that, Chair, I'm happy to remove the report and take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens, and again, thanks to you and the officers for all the work on this. Yes, it was quite a hot topic, as I think you alluded to. Swansea did give more exemptions to the 20 mile per hour than any other authority, so quite rightly we would expect probably a lower amount of adjustment than other authorities as part of this review. But again, you know, with any criteria, there are always tweaks that you can make. And again, I think whilst the title of this report is 20 miles per hour, actually, as you said, it's likely to see some additional 30s being introduced as part of the tweaking of the arrangements. But again, you look at the data across Wales, the 20 miles per hour policy is working. It's saving lives. They've seen a significant reduction in terms of fatalities and casualties. So, you know, there are people alive today, children alive today, that probably would have died had they been struck at a higher speed. So again, I'm sure we all support the aims of trying to make sure that our roads are as safe as possible. So thank you, Councillor Stevens, for the report. Happy to second. Are there any comments or questions for Councillor Stevens on this report? If not, again, could I ask you to show if you're in approval of recommendations on page 544 of the agenda? Thank you very much. That is carried, and that's our final item for today in terms of open session. But we have item 18, which asks us, would we be prepared to accept the legal officer's recommendations, which are on pages 553 to 556, for the rationale for going into private session. Could I ask you all if you could show if you're in agreement? Thank you very much, and that's what we will do then. So I'll just pause for a second.